Hi everyone, welcome to week number 3. I'm probably going to post a couple of videos this week over the course of time just to kind of summarize where we're at in the class, add maybe a tiny bit more content, and help prepare you for the Précis. So remember that this evening we have an office hour, and somebody asked to do office hours in the morning, which I'm happy to do. Remember, these are all voluntary, and so you're welcome to visit the office hours or not. So, but I'll probably add one in the morning this week because your Précis is coming up next week, and so I'm sure you all have a few questions about that, which I will post a video about that as well. But I want to make it available to you to ask me questions just directly. So, yeah, this video I want to talk a little bit about weapons of the spirit and moral norms. You saw the lecture that I posted on moral norms. And what I'm doing is I'm taking some of Stassen and Gushie's moral norms from Kingdom Ethics, and then combining them and mashing them up with some of the moral norms from Richard Hayes' book. So I think I have 6 there. I might add 1 or 2 to that. But you're watching the film Weapons of the Spirit 1 because it's an example of Christian ethics that stands the test of history. That when we look back at a particular community or a particular moral choice that Christians are making, we look back and say that was a good choice. What can we learn from that community and that choice? And so that's one example. 2, it's an important story for us to carry forward, especially honestly in our day. Because the common narrative is Christianity has caused problems in history and caused problems in culture. And we want to, and that's a bigger part of a bigger narrative that religion in general causes problems. And so we want to say, well, there's some problems that religion causes, and Christianity certainly has been culpable in some of those, but Christianity, specifically, and religion in general, have also contributed to the flourishing of society, and this is one example. Pierre and I have become good friends because he gives me special permission to show this. As you saw, it's a beta version. It is it's being remastered digitally, and so it's in production right now, and he just allows me to show it to my classes so that you can all see it because he thinks that it's an important story for Christians to see, and he's given me special permission. So the one thing that you can't do is take this film and show it in another place. I have special permission to show it to you as students, and it's a great privilege that he's given to us, but we can't abuse that privilege by taking it elsewhere, even though I'd love to show it in some other venues. So we become good friends, and he created this story created this documentary to tell the story of his village and the incredible things that they did, and to ask the question, why did they do it? And that comes to our question about moral norms. And so as you watch the film, basically you see one moral norm that stands out, and a lot of you identified that as a particular immediate judgment. A particular immediate judgment, like I said in the lecture, is a moral judgment that you make just right off the top of your head. You may be able to access reasons why you made that judgment, or you may not be able to access those reasons, but you make the judgment nonetheless. So you judge something as right or wrong immediately. And that's what the story of the villagers in Les Chambon did, is they made an immediate judgment about the rightness of rescuing Jews, and you see that in their response to the question initially is, that's a stupid question. Why wouldn't we do this? Any normal human being would do this, and we didn't organize it, we just did it. And that's what they're saying is they weren't accessing reasons, they didn't have committees to decide upon it, they just did it. And that's a particular immediate judgment. And then the question becomes, well, how did they get formed in such a way that that particular immediate judgment came out? And as an application then for us in our time, how do we get formed in such a way that we make the right particular immediate judgments. And if you're in a leadership context in the church, then how do you form the community that you lead in such a way that they make the appropriate particular immediate judgments? And as the film develops and unfolds, you will see all the different moral norms come out. They appeal to rules, they appeal to principles that kind of govern those rules, and they appeal to basic convictions. They appeal to paradigms as well. Paradigms are stories that are told that have moral lessons in them. Not necessarily that they say the moral lessons, but the stories get told over and over and over again in order, and as they get told and retold, you kind of get the moral importance of the story just embedded in you. And so that's one way, and it's a very ancient way of doing moral formation, is through paradigms. And then the other one is that I don't think I had in the lecture, but it's models. And they highlighted 3 models in that in the film, people to emulate, and it was the 2 pastors, Andrew Trocmé and Edward Teese, and then also the youth worker Daniel Trocmé. And so they exemplified them. They held them up as models to be followed, and you see that all throughout the film. So it just peels the layers of their moral decision. You just keep peeling the layers out and seeing that there are reasons, there are motivations for them to make these judgments. There is a background for them to make these judgments, and they made them correctly. Now, what can we learn from this, and how can we do moral formation in such a way that ourselves, we make particular immediate judgments that are correct, and then in our communities we make particular immediate judgments. A couple things from your posts in your reflections on Weapons of the Spirit. A lot of you who maybe have started Bonhoeffer's Black Jesus, or have taken the class on Bonhoeffer, or have a little bit of historical understanding of Bonhoeffer, have mentioned the connection, right, between what this village did and then Bonhoeffer's kind of prescient protest against the Nazis in his book Cost of Discipleship. And I think if you have an interest in that, in some of those questions, reading Reggie Williams' book Bonhoeffer's Black Jesus for your précis is a good next step for that, and you'll be able to untangle that, how Bonhoeffer was formed in such a way. It's a different formation than the village in Les Chambon, but the same result. And so that's a really important book as well. The second thing that your class kind of brought out that other classes have not brought out is the worry about breaking rules, like the rule of do not lie or do not forge false papers. Those kinds of things that some of you have talked about. How do we order or reorder? Do rules become subservient to principles, to basic convictions? All of those kinds of things. When they're hiding Jews and they're creating false papers and hiding them, I thought it was really creative the way that they hid them in the beehives. And so the one thing that this brings up, the question about rules, it's a question about moral principles in general, and it fits in the deontological, sorry, easy for me to say, in the model of ethics called deontology, basically a rule-based model. That is, you find the rules that will govern all human action, and those rules are set, and you can't ever violate them. The problem with deontology is you always find a circumstance or a situation that you have to violate one rule or another. And so the Corrie ten Boom example is, are you hiding Jews? If she says yes and doesn't violate the rule of lying, then those Jews get murdered. If she says no, then she's violating the rule of lying. The same with Bonhoeffer in his participation in the Valkyrie Project. Was he morally justified in participating in that? So you have these questions about this, and what it helps you to frame is one thing is a basic conviction of, do you live in a legal kingdom or do you live in a relational kingdom? And if you live in a legal kingdom, then these laws and these rules create a bounded set of appropriate moral action. And then, but if you live in a relational kingdom, then what it does is points you to key specific relationships, and then you move your moral formation out from those relationships, and especially centered on a relationship with Christ. And so that's called a centered set, where your focus is on the center. You're moving towards the center, and that orients all your moral decisions. And so it's a good thing to be thinking about as one of our basic convictions as we develop our Christian worldview. A couple of other things from the film, just some highlights that I think we can learn from. When they talked about the pastors, Edward Thies and Andre Trocmé, they talked about them being a minority of two, right? So when the Nazis were invading, they said to not use violence in resistance of the Nazis. And then when the Nazis conquered France, they said not to cooperate with the Nazis. And so they always were a minority of two. And sometimes you have to, as Christians and as a church, we have to stake our claim in no matter what the shifting tides of culture, which direction that they go. So I really like that minority of two. The second thing I really loved was the conspiracy of goodness. We have a lot of conspiracy conversations going on right now in our culture, and we need to create as a church some conspiracies of goodness. How do we promote the flourishing of human beings beyond our particular church community into our neighborhoods, and you can just expand the communities and the definition and boundaries of those communities outward, but participating in a conspiracy of goodness for our community. It's kind of a Jeremiah 29 verses 4-7. Seek the welfare of the city, for if the city flourishes, you'll flourish. And then the third thing that I want to bring to your attention is, again, back to the pastors and their model. They began their careers in the metropolitan areas in France. And because of their views, their specifically nonviolent views, they got pushed, quote unquote, from the film to these backwater parishes in these remote villages. But we're still reading about these people. So what I want to say for you, that for all of you that are studying and go into ministry, be lay leaders in your church, there are no small callings. That the calling that God has put on your life, whether it's for a small community or a large community, our call is not to always look and say, hey, it has to be bigger, it has to be better, the grass is always greener, but to actually just be faithful in what God has called us to do. God called them into that community, and they rescued 5,000 Jews in that community, and we're still talking about what they did right. So there's no small callings. Okay, well, it looks like we might have a little more than 15 minutes worth of video, because that one took a little time. I love that film. I tear up every time I watch it. I probably watched it 30 to 35 times, and I just love it, and I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Okay, I'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more, some content of class, maybe tomorrow.